A billionaire collapsed in the middle of a crowded boardroom, and the only one who rushed to help wasn't a doctor or a bodyguard, but the janitor no one ever noticed. As panic spread, he fought against shouts to stay back, knelt beside her, and did what no one else dared to do. He gave her a kiss that wasn't meant for romance, but for survival. That single moment would change both of their lives forever and expose a truth that money could never hide. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The morning light slid across the glass walls of Langford Tower, painting long reflections on polished marble floors. Outside downtown, Austin was waking up coffee carts humming horns echoing from the freeway, the air carrying that faint cinnamon scent of early autumn. Inside the 42nd floor boardroom, everything gleamed silver pens, leather chairs, faces tense behind screens. Victoria Langford sat at the head of the table, posture straight as if cut from the same steel as the skyline behind her. At 42, she had built her company from a 2-room office to a glass empire that bore her name. She didn't blink when men twice her age tried to interrupt. She didn't fidget when the market dipped. People said she was born to lead. She knew she had simply learned to survive. Her assistant, Carmen Diaz, slid a folder onto the table. "The new safety audit, ma'am." Victoria nodded, eyes fixed on the numbers. "Good. If they fail the next inspection, I want the cleaning contractor replaced." "Yes, ma'am." Carmen's voice held that careful tone she used when she sensed Victoria's walls rising higher than usual. Somewhere below them, an elevator bell chimed. The day moved on one decision after another. Outside her office, people whispered about bonuses, deadlines, the big quarterly announcement. Inside, Victoria drank her coffee cold and watched the world like a stranger behind glass. Downstairs in the maintenance wing, Ethan Cole tied the laces of his worn boots. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and oil. His daughter's crayon drawing 2 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun was folded in his shirt pocket. He touched it once before starting his shift. "Another day, kiddo," he murmured. He'd taken the janitor job 6 months earlier after his old construction site shut down. The pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and it meant Lily could keep her place at the little daycare near home. Every night he promised himself things would get better. Every morning he repeated the same line. At 9:15 a.m., while executives argued about profit margins above, Ethan was mopping the 40th floor hallway. He liked this floor quiet, no chatter, just the rhythmic squeak of his mop and the hum of the vents. He never expected anyone important to notice him. Then the fire alarm wailed. Red lights blinked. The building's calm voice announced an evacuation. Doors slammed open. People poured into the stairwells, clutching laptops and phones. On the 42nd floor, Carmen guided employees out while Victoria checked her watch, annoyed more than frightened. "It's probably a drill," she said, gathering her tablet. But then a tremor rattled the floor beneath her shoes. Somewhere down the hallway, a crash metal glass a shout. The power flickered. "Ma'am, we have to go," Carmen urged. Victoria hesitated, pride wrestling with instinct. Then she moved. In the rush toward the exit, a ceiling tile cracked loose, showering dust. Someone screamed. The hallway filled with smoke from an electrical short. On the 40th floor, Ethan heard the chaos. He tossed the mop aside and ran for the stairwell, then froze. A woman's cough echoed from above, faint but sharp. The emergency lights flickered again. Against every rule, he turned and climbed upward. He found her near the collapsed light fixture, half hidden by dust. The sharp scent of burning plastic filled the air. Her designer heels slipped as she tried to stand. Ethan didn't recognize her face, only saw fear in the way she pressed one hand against her ribs. "Ma'am, we've got to go," he said, his voice steady. I can't." Without thinking, he lifted her over his shoulder. She was lighter than she looked, or maybe adrenaline made her weight vanish. Step by step through the haze, he carried her down the stairs. The world narrowed to smoke sirens and the sound of her uneven breathing near his ear. They burst out onto the street where fire trucks wailed and people gathered behind yellow tape. The wind was cool, smelling of asphalt and burnt wiring. Ethan set her down gently on the curb. She coughed, trembling, mascara streaked. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow, just doing what anyone would. But she was already being surrounded, assistants, paramedics, reporters. Someone shouted her name. Victoria Langford. Cameras clicked. Ethan stepped back unseen once more as a medic guided her toward the ambulance. He didn't notice the man in a gray suit watching from behind the crowd. Arms crossed, eyes narrowing. Damon Pierce, CFO of Langford Industries. To him, Ethan wasn't a hero. He was a risk, a headline waiting to happen. As the ambulance doors closed, Victoria caught a glimpse of Ethan through the glass, dusty calm, standing apart like a shadow. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, two worlds crossing. Then the sirens drowned everything else. She didn't know it yet, but the man who just saved her life would soon lose everything because of her. The afternoon settled over Austin like a blanket of light and sirens. By the time the smoke cleared and the news vans rolled away, the street outside Langford Tower smelled faintly of ozone and fear. Reporters clustered at every angle, microphones gleaming, voices throwing words like miracle hero janitor, corporate safety failure. Inside the hospital, Victoria Langford sat upright on a narrow bed, a thin bruise along her wrist, her silk blouse traded for a hospital gown that smelled faintly of detergent. She hated the weakness that came with oxygen tubes and soft voices. Yet as she watched the monitor blink, something she couldn't name pressed against her chest, a fragile mixture of gratitude and guilt. Carmen entered quietly, carrying a paper cup of coffee. "They said you were lucky, ma'am." Victoria looked at the ceiling. Luck had nothing to do with it. "They want to know the name of the man who carried you out, who the janitor, Ethan Cole. Reporters already found out his name. Someone filmed him on their phone." Carmen hesitated. "People are calling him a hero." Victoria's expression tightened. "Media loves a headline. Just make sure no one spins this against the company." Carmen's eyes softened. "He risked his life for you." "I didn't ask him to," Victoria said too quickly. She took the coffee, hands trembling slightly before she steadied them on her lap. The truth was, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel the heat, the fall of dust, the sound of his voice cutting through the chaos. It had been years since anyone had reached for her without asking for something in return. Down the hall, Ethan sat in the waiting area, boots leaving faint marks on the polished floor. The nurse had checked his shoulder, just a mild strain. He refused further care. "There are folks worse off," he'd said, like he was apologizing for being there at all. He was about to leave when a man in a gray suit approached Damon Pierce, the CFO. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Cole, isn't it?" Damon asked smoothly. "The company appreciates what you did today. Truly." Ethan stood uneasy. "I didn't do it for the company." "Of course," Damon said. "Still, these situations are delicate. You understand how rumors start. The press can twist things. We'd prefer to handle the narrative internally." Ethan frowned. "Sir, I don't want trouble. I just want to go home to my daughter." Damon gave a short nod, polite as a closing door. "Good man. Then let's make sure this doesn't turn into something messy. HR will contact you tomorrow." Something in the tone made Ethan's stomach tighten, but he was tired and the day had already stretched too long. He gathered his jacket and stepped into the fading light outside the hospital. The city hummed around him, traffic chatter, the steady rhythm of life that didn't pause for anyone's heroics. He stopped by a vending machine, fed in a few coins, and bought a small juice box for Lily. She liked the apple flavor. It was the little things that kept him steady. At home, the porch light flickered weakly as he unlocked the door. Daddy Lily ran from the couch, a tangle of curls and joy. She threw her arms around his legs. "Hey, pumpkin," he murmured, lifting her into his arms. "Guess what, Daddy's okay." She kissed his cheek, then held up her drawing. This one was new, a woman with bright yellow hair next to the stick figure version of him. "Is that you and your friend?" he asked, smiling. "She's the lady you saved," Lily said proudly. "You're a hero." "Daddy." Ethan's smile faltered. He wanted to tell her that real heroes didn't mop floors or lose sleep over rent, but he couldn't crush that glow in her eyes. Maybe, he said softly, maybe just for today. Back in her penthouse apartment, Victoria stood by the window watching the skyline blink alive as dusk fell. Her phone buzzed with calls she didn't answer, board members, investors, reporters. Below her, the tower still bore scorch marks near the 40th floor. A faint tremor passed through her hand as she traced the edge of the glass. Carmen's voice echoed in her mind. "He risked his life for you." She whispered to the reflection, "And I don't even know his story." Behind her, the television murmured about the incident. A reporter's voice filled the room. The janitor's quick action prevented what could have been a tragedy. No official statement yet from Langford Industries. Victoria turned off the screen. Silence returned, deep and heavy. For the first time in years, she wondered if power and success had insulated her not only from risk, but from the very people who kept her world running. Somewhere in the same city, Ethan tucked Lily into bed and stared out his window at the distant shimmer of Langford Tower. He felt proud, confused, and oddly restless. Tomorrow, he thought, would be just another day. He didn't yet know that tomorrow was when everything would start to fall apart. Morning returned to Austin as if the city had already forgotten the smoke and headlines from the day before. But inside, Langford, Industries whispers traveled faster than emails. The story of the janitor who saved the CEO had become breakfast gossip passed along with bagels, coffee, and smirks. Ethan arrived early as usual. He parked his old pickup truck at the edge of the lot and sat there a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The radio murmured an old country tune about second chances. He smiled faintly, thinking of Lily's drawing taped to the fridge. Then he stepped out, ready to work. The lobby gleamed like nothing had happened. Fresh flowers replaced the burned ones. The marble had been polished overnight. To anyone walking in the building looked untouched, but Ethan could still smell the faint trace of smoke clinging to the vents, a ghost of yesterday's fear. "Morning, Mr. Cole." The security guard, Frank, gave him a friendly nod. "Morning, Frank. How's your shoulder?" "Still sore from running down 42 flights. But I'll live," Frank chuckled. "Hey, you're famous, man. They're calling you the hero janitor." Ethan shook his head. "I just did what needed doing." Frank leaned in. "Well, the lady you saved? She runs this whole show. Bet she's going to thank you herself." Ethan smiled politely, but said nothing. He didn't believe in fairy tales, not in skyscrapers, not in business suits. He clocked in, picked up his mop bucket, and went to work. By mid-morning, the HR department sent for him. The office smelled of coffee and tension. 2 people waited inside, Damon Pierce and a woman from legal. "Mr. Cole," Damon said with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Please have a seat." Ethan sat, carefully wiping his hands on his uniform pants. "Is there some problem?" "Not a problem," Damon said. "Just a concern. Yesterday's incident drew a lot of media attention. Some of that footage is circulating online." "I didn't post anything," Ethan said quickly. "We know," Damon replied. "But unfortunately, your name's out there and people are asking questions about safety, about procedures. The board feels it would be best for everyone if we ended your contract early. You'll receive full pay for the month." Ethan blinked, unable to process the words. "You're firing me for helping the woman from legal," folded her hands. "For liability reasons, Mr. Cole. You weren't authorized to enter restricted floors. If you'd been injured, the company could have faced serious claims." He felt his throat tighten. "So I should have just let her die." Damon's smile didn't falter. "We're grateful you didn't, but we have to protect the company." There was a pause, the kind that made walls feel smaller. Ethan rose slowly, jaw tight. "You don't have to worry. I won't be anyone's problem." He left the office, the echo of his boots sharp against the tiles. The hallway that had once been his routine now felt like enemy ground. Outside, the sun was too bright. He sat on the steps for a long time, hands clasped, staring at the traffic. His badge, still warm from his pocket, rested on his palm. The tiny printed photo looked back at him, a tired man in a faded uniform. He dropped it into the trash can. That afternoon, he went to pick up Lily from daycare. The children's laughter was a balm against the noise in his head. When she ran into his arms, the world shrank to something bearable again. "Daddy, did they clap for you today?" she asked. "Like heroes on TV?" He smiled. "Something like that, sweetheart." They walked home together, her hand gripping his. She talked about crafts and apple slices and a class pet named Sunny. Ethan nodded, listening, though his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Rent, groceries, the half-tank of gas left in his truck. That night he made macaroni and cheese, the kind from a box, and they ate on the porch steps. The evening air carried the smell of barbecue from a neighbor's yard. Fireflies blinked near the grass. Lily looked up at him. "You'll get another job soon, right?" "Sure will." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "You know your dad always figures things out." But when she went to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table long after the lights dimmed. The bills lay spread out like small accusations. His phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Cole," a woman's voice asked. "This is Channel 7 News. We'd love to have you share your story, what it was like saving Victoria Langford." He hesitated. "Ma'am, I'd rather not. People need to hear from real heroes," she said gently. "It might inspire others." He ended the call. Inspiration didn't pay rent. The next morning, the story was everywhere anyway. Hero janitor, fired after saving CEO. His name trended online. Strangers argued about him on talk shows. Some called him brave, others called him reckless. And somewhere in her glass office, Victoria Langford read the same headline and felt something twist in her stomach. She picked up her phone. "Carmen," she said quietly, "find out what happened to the man who saved me." Victoria Langford wasn't easily shaken. She'd faced boardroom ambushes, hostile takeovers, even a near bankruptcy during the pandemic. But the words on her tablet, "Hero janitor, fired after saving CEO," made her stomach knot in a way no quarterly loss ever had. She read every paragraph twice. The comments beneath were worse. Typical corporate greed. They'd rather save their image than a man's job. Langford Industries. No good deed goes unpunished. "Carmen," she called. Her assistant entered holding 2 coffees and the look of someone walking into a storm. "You saw it, I did." Victoria's voice was calm, but the calm felt dangerous. "Is it true?" Carmen hesitated. "HR confirmed termination. Damon authorized it last night." Victoria exhaled slow and sharp. "And nobody thought to consult me." "You were recovering. They said you wanted no press. I didn't ask for silence at the expense of decency." She set the tablet down, its screen going dark. "Get me his file. Address, contact number, everything." Carmen nodded, quietly relieved. "Yes, ma'am." For the first time in a long while, Victoria left her office without an appointment. She took the private elevator, the same one Ethan had carried her down through smoke and chaos. It hummed softly, almost respectfully, as if remembering. Outside, the air smelled of rain. She drove herself, something she hadn't done in years, to a modest neighborhood east of the city. The streets were lined with small houses, porches sagging under hanging plants, flags fluttering from mailboxes. It was a world far from the glass and steel she called home. Ethan's truck sat in the driveway of a weathered blue house. A little girl's bicycle leaned against the porch railing, pink streamers tangled from yesterday's wind. Victoria hesitated before knocking. When the door opened, she saw Lily, first big brown eyes, messy curls, a shy smile. "Hi there," Victoria said gently. "Is your dad home?" The girl nodded and ran inside. Moments later, Ethan appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He froze when he saw her. "Ms. Langford." His voice carried both surprise and caution. "I didn't mean to intrude," she said. "I wanted to thank you properly, and to apologize." He stepped aside, polite but wary. "You didn't have to drive all this way." She entered, eyes taking in the tidy living room, the worn couch, Lily's drawings on the fridge, the faint smell of coffee and cinnamon toast. "They shouldn't have fired you," she said quietly. "I didn't know until this morning." Ethan shrugged. "That's how it goes. Companies protect themselves first. That's not good enough." She turned to face him. "You risked your life for me. The least I can do is make this right." He met her gaze evenly. "With respect, ma'am, it's not about making it right. It's about doing right." Her throat tightened. There was no accusation in his tone, only honesty, and that hurt more than anger would have. "I don't expect charity," he continued. "I just want to work, provide for my kid, and sleep at night knowing I did the right thing." Victoria glanced toward Lily, who was peeking from the hallway, curious. "You've done more than that," she said softly. "You reminded me that integrity still exists in this city." Ethan smiled faintly, but his eyes stayed guarded. "That's kind of you to say. But talk like that doesn't fix bills." She reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope. "There's a check inside 3 months' pay. Consider it personal compensation." He looked at it, then shook his head. "Ma'am, I appreciate it truly, but I can't take your money." "Why not?" "Because if I do, it means I saved you for something, and that's not the kind of man I'm trying to be." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy but clean. She lowered the envelope, studying him, this man who'd lost everything and still stood taller than most people she knew. "Then at least let me help in another way," she said finally. "Let me talk to your daughter's school. Maybe there's a scholarship program I can." Ethan smiled gently. "We'll manage. We always do." Victoria nodded, feeling smaller than she had in years. "If you ever need anything at all, please call me." She wrote her number on the back of a business card and placed it on the table. When she left, the rain had started. It tapped softly on her windshield as she drove away, blurring the houses into streaks of color. For the first time since the fire, she didn't turn on the radio. Back inside, Lily climbed into her father's lap. Who was the lady? Ethan hugged her close. Just someone learning how to say thank you. That evening, as he washed the dishes, he noticed the card still lying on the table, her name in elegant print, the number beneath it. He thought of throwing it away, but something stopped him. He tucked it behind the fridge magnet that held Lily's drawings. He didn't know why, but part of him felt that his story with Victoria Langford wasn't finished yet. And miles away in her penthouse overlooking the city lights, Victoria stared out the window with the same uneasy thought. 3 days passed before Victoria returned to the office. The storm of headlines had quieted, replaced by newer scandals. But inside Langford Tower, the tension still hummed beneath the polished calm, like a low note no one wanted to hear. She stepped through the lobby alone, coat draped over her arm. The receptionist smiled nervously. Employees paused mid-conversation, offering polite greetings that didn't reach their eyes. Victoria felt the distance, but said nothing. It wasn't fear that unsettled her. It was awareness, the subtle realization that she'd become a story in her own company. Upstairs, sunlight poured through her office windows. Carmen was already there, arranging folders, a faint tremor in her hands. "Morning," Victoria said. "Good morning, ma'am." Carmen hesitated, then added, "Damon's been asking for you. He's in a meeting with legal about the termination review." "Let him wait." Carmen nodded and placed a USB drive on the desk. "Before you go into battle, there's something you should see." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "The security footage from the fire. A technician found it. You were listed as restricted access, but he thought you'd want a copy." Victoria stared at the small black device, a weight far heavier than plastic. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she plugged it into her laptop. The screen filled with grainy footage alarms, flashing smoke curling through corridors. She watched herself stumble, a blur of dust and panic, and then she saw him, Ethan, emerging through the haze, lifting her as if she were something fragile and worth saving. He shielded her head from falling debris, his back taking the hit of a collapsing beam. He didn't hesitate, didn't look for cameras, didn't even glance around for witnesses. Carmen stood silently behind her. When the video ended, Victoria sat still, staring at the frozen image of Ethan pushing open the stairwell door. He didn't think twice, she whispered, "No, ma'am." Victoria leaned back in her chair, feeling something shift deep inside her, a quiet cracking of the armor she'd worn for years. "Carmen," she said softly, "have I always been this blind?" Carmen hesitated. "You've always been focused, ma'am. But maybe it's time to look sideways once in a while." Outside, the city was alive again, buses, sighing horns blending into the low hum of life. Victoria stood by the window, watching tiny figures crossing the street below. "When did we stop seeing people?" she murmured. Before Carmen could answer, the intercom buzzed. Damon's voice came through, smooth as always. "Victoria, legal is ready for you. We should discuss the PR containment." "Containment," she repeated. "Is that what we're calling decency now?" Carmen gave a small, knowing smile. "Should I tell him you're on your way?" "Yes," Victoria said, straightening her jacket. "But he won't like what I have to say." She walked into the conference room moments later. Damon stood at the head of the table, a screen behind him showing charts and projected losses. He turned, his smile polished to perfection. "Victoria," he said warmly, "glad you're back. We've drafted a statement to clarify the situation." "Clarify?" she asked. "Or rewrite?" He blinked. "We're protecting the company's image. The board was clear. This needs to fade quietly." Victoria took a deep breath. Voice even. "No, Damon, this company doesn't need silence. It needs a spine." A murmur rippled through the room. "You fired a man who risked his life to save me," she continued, "and instead of correcting that, you tried to bury it. That ends today." Damon's tone sharpened. "Victoria, I understand your emotions, but we can't let sympathy dictate policy." "It's not sympathy," she said. "It's accountability, something we've been trading for convenience." He stepped closer. "And if the board disagrees—" She met his eyes, steady. "Then they can fire me too." Silence filled the space, thick, electric. Damon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. When the meeting ended, Victoria walked out, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. She had built her empire on control, on keeping emotion out of every equation. But for the first time, she realized how many people that logic had left behind. That afternoon, she called Carmen into her office. "Find Ethan Cole again, this time not as a contractor. As a man we owe more than a paycheck to." Carmen smiled, a quiet pride in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. I'll find him." Victoria nodded, gazing once more at the skyline. Beyond the glass, the city shimmered, messy, flawed, alive. And somewhere out there, a janitor with tired hands and a gentle heart was fixing a leaky faucet, unaware that his story was about to return to him. Carmen spent the next 2 days trying to track Ethan down. His number from the old employee file had been disconnected, and the HR office claimed they'd mailed his final paycheck, nothing further owed. Victoria sat in her office, the same footage looping on her computer screen, the same question echoing in her chest. How do you repay someone who never asked for anything? By Thursday, Carmen returned with a small smile. Found him. He's been doing repair jobs out in East Austin, church plumbing school maintenance cash work mostly. Victoria nodded. Set up a meeting. Carmen hesitated. "Ma'am, with all due respect, maybe show up yourself. He doesn't trust suits anymore." The words stung mostly because they were true. That afternoon, Victoria left the tower again, trading her heels for plain flats, her silk blouse for a simple gray sweater. The drive east took her past strip malls and pawn shops into streets where murals bloomed across brick walls and kids chased basketballs barefoot. The smell of barbecue smoke hung heavy in the air. She found Ethan behind a small Methodist church, bent over a leaking pipe. His shirt was damp with sweat sleeves rolled to the elbow. Lily sat nearby, coloring on a cardboard box, humming softly. Victoria stood there a moment, unnoticed. The scene was so ordinary it ached something she hadn't felt in years. When Ethan finally looked up, his surprise melted into something more cautious. "You again? I told you I'd find a way to make it right," she said. He wiped his hands on a rag. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am," she said quietly. "Just Victoria." He studied her, wary but curious. "What are you really doing here?" She smiled faintly. "Trying to remember what being human feels like." That broke the tension. He laughed, a small, tired laugh, but real. Lily looked up, giggling just because her dad did. Victoria crouched beside her. "Hi, Lily. What are you drawing?" "A rainbow," the girl said proudly. "Daddy says rainbows mean the storm is over." Victoria felt her throat tighten. He's right. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't charity," she said, placing it on the wooden step. "It's a formal reinstatement. You'll have your job back with a promotion. Head of Facility Safety, full benefits." Ethan frowned. "You think the company wants me back after that circus?" "The company doesn't have a choice," she said simply. "It's my decision, and I'm not doing it for appearances. I'm doing it because good people shouldn't be punished for doing the right thing." He stared at her for a long time, the tension in his shoulders easing little by little. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I ask." She smiled, and this time it wasn't the polished smile of a CEO. It was something smaller, truer. "You once told me talk doesn't fix bills. Maybe action will." As she stood to leave, Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Victoria." "Yes, sweetheart?" The little girl handed her the drawing, a rainbow stretching over 2 stick figures, one tall and one small. "It's you and Daddy. You can keep it." Victoria took the paper carefully, her eyes shining in the afternoon light. "Thank you, Lily. I'll keep it somewhere special." She walked back to her car, the sound of church bells echoing faintly behind her. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, but for once it didn't look like glass and metal, it looked like home. That night, back in her penthouse, Victoria placed the crayon drawing on her desk, beside the framed awards and crystal trophies. It looked out of place and somehow perfect. She poured herself a cup of tea instead of wine, opened her laptop, and began typing an email to the board. Effective immediately, Langford Industries will establish a community safety initiative. The first hire will be Ethan Cole. She hit send before she could think twice. Outside, the city pulsed with quiet life. Somewhere out there, a father tucked his daughter into bed, believing his day was over. He didn't know that his act of courage had started something far larger than either of them could imagine. And as Victoria turned off the light, the rainbow on her desk caught a sliver of moonlight casting soft colors across the cold glass walls, like a promise beginning to take shape. Saturday mornings in Austin had a way of feeling unhurried dog walkers with coffee cups. The faint hum of lawnmowers' sunlight washing the old neighborhoods in gold. Ethan sat on his porch mug in hand watching Lily chase bubbles across the yard. The church job had ended early that week, and for once he allowed himself a moment of stillness. But peace never lasted long. A white SUV rolled up to the curb, polished enough to reflect the morning light. A woman stepped out, Carmen Diaz, wearing jeans instead of her usual pencil skirt. She smiled, holding a folder close. Mr. Cole. Ethan blinked. "You must be from Langford." She nodded. "Carmen Diaz, Ms. Langford's assistant. May I?" He gestured toward the porch chair. "Sure, though, I don't have the fancy coffee you're used to." She laughed softly. "That's fine. I've had enough boardroom coffee to last a lifetime." For a while they sat in the quiet. Lily's laughter filled the air. Carmen opened the folder and handed him a paper. "It's official now. The position Ms. Langford mentioned, Director of Facility Safety and Employee Welfare. It's yours if you want it." Ethan scanned the contract. Benefits, salary, a level of respect he'd never imagined seeing next to his name. "She doesn't owe me this," he said almost to himself. "No." Carmen agreed. "But maybe she needs it. People like her don't get many chances to make things right." He folded the paper carefully. "And people like me don't get many chances, period." Lily climbed onto his lap, her small fingers brushing over the company logo on the letterhead. "Is that your new job, Daddy?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe." Carmen rose to leave, her tone soft. "She'll be at the East Side Community Center tomorrow morning. There's a volunteer event, food drive, school supply donation. She said she'd understand if you wanted to talk in person." He looked up. "She's volunteering. She's trying," Carmen said. "Sometimes that's harder than it sounds." After she left, Ethan sat still for a long time. The contract lay on the porch table, the ink catching the sunlight. Lily leaned her head against his arm. "Are you going to take it, Daddy?" He didn't answer right away. "You ever try to fix something that's been broken a long time, sweetheart? Like my old doll?" He smiled. "Yeah, like that." The next morning he took the city bus downtown. The East Side Community Center buzzed with volunteers, students unloading canned goods, retirees sorting clothes. Victoria Langford stood near the registration table, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, helping stack boxes like she'd done it her whole life. When she saw him, surprise flickered across her face, followed by a genuine smile. "You came. I figured I'd see if you were serious about all that talk." "I am," she said. "Every word." He walked beside her, carrying boxes toward the pantry shelves. The air smelled of coffee, cardboard, and something simple goodwill. They worked without speaking for a while, the silence comfortable. Finally he asked, "Why me out of all the people in your company?" She set down a box. "Because you didn't walk away when everyone else did. Because Iba built a company that forgot the value of people like you, and because I don't want to keep pretending that was success." Ethan studied her face, the steadiness in her eyes. "That's a heavy kind of honesty, Ms. Langford." "Victoria," she corrected gently. "If I'm asking you to help build something better, we start with that." He nodded slowly. "Then, maybe we've got something to talk about." Outside, the Texas sun burned through a thin veil of clouds, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was on the outside looking in. He felt seen. Still, he knew better than to believe change came without a price. As the day wound down, a familiar figure appeared by the parking lot, Damon Pierce, the CFO. His expression was polite, but his eyes were ice. "Mr. Cole," he said smoothly. "Glad to see you're keeping busy. Quite the comeback story." Ethan didn't like the tone. "Just trying to earn an honest living." Damon smiled, thin and sharp. "Oh, I'm sure. But you might want to remember spotlights fade quickly, and people who enjoy them too long usually burn." Ethan frowned, but Damon was already walking away, his words trailing like smoke. Victoria approached moments later, noticing Ethan's tense shoulders. "Everything okay?" He forced a smile. "Fine. Just old ghosts, I guess." She glanced toward the parking lot, her expression hardening. If Damon bothers you again, you tell me. He met her gaze. I can handle myself, I don't doubt that she said quietly. But this time you won't have to handle it alone. Her words lingered in the air long after she left. That night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she asked sleepily, "Did you help the people today?" He brushed her hair back. "Yeah, I did." "And did they help you too?" He paused, smiling at the simple wisdom of children. "Yeah, baby, I think they did." But as he turned off the light, he couldn't shake Damon's warning because some men didn't threaten for sport. They threatened because they already had a plan. And somewhere across town, Damon Pierce was making a call that would test every ounce of the redemption Victoria Langford had promised. That night, Victoria sat in her apartment, the city lights flickering like restless thoughts. She opened her laptop, Ethan's contract still unsigned. She could wait, but something told her the past wouldn't. Across town, Ethan sat on the porch again, the offer letter beside a cooling mug of coffee. He looked at Lily through the window, asleep with her teddy bear tucked under her chin. Maybe for once he could stop running. Maybe this was what second chances looked like. The next morning he walked into Langford Tower. No suit, no tie, just himself. When the elevator doors opened, Victoria was waiting. She smiled quietly. "So have you decided?" He handed her the signed contract. "Let's build something better." Relief softened her face. "Then we start today." But down the hall, Damon Pierce watched from his office window, jaw tight. He made a call, voice low. "Yeah, I want everything on Ethan Cole old debts records, anything." Quietly. As Victoria and Ethan shook hands, unaware of the storm gathering behind them, sunlight poured across the lobby like a promise, fragile, hopeful, and soon to be tested. Monday morning came with a strange calm. The Langford Tower lobby, once a blur of polished shoes and distant glances, felt different now. People greeted Ethan as he passed, not with pity but quiet respect. He wore a fresh uniform, clean shirt, ID badge, clipped neatly, the words Director of Facility Safety and Welfare shining beneath his name. It didn't feel real yet. Victoria met him in the conference room. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole," she said with a warm smile. "Still feels strange hearing that title," he admitted. "You've earned it," she said. "Today's orientation is simple. Meet the staff. Visit the new floor and sign off on our safety review plan. After that, I'll show you your office." "My office?" He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't think I'd ever have one of those." "You do now," she replied, her smile widening. As they walked through the newly renovated wing, Ethan noticed the difference immediately: brighter lighting, wider halls, a real break room, with fresh coffee instead of vending machine sludge. "You changed all this?" he asked. Victoria nodded. "The first phase of our new employee program. You inspired it." He chuckled softly. "Guess I'll have to make sure it actually works." But while the building hummed with new beginnings, something colder moved underneath. Damon Pierce watched from his office upstairs, his fingers drumming on the desk. On his screen glowed an email from a private investigator. Subject: Ethan Cole, juvenile misdemeanor record confirmed. Arrested at 16 for shoplifting cough medicine. Case sealed but retrievable through state archives. Awaiting instructions. Damon's lips curved into a thin, satisfied smile. Perfect. By noon, Ethan had already won over half the staff. He didn't speak like management. He spoke like someone who understood what it meant to clean floors at 2 a.m. or miss a paycheck. People listened because he listened first. At lunch, Victoria joined him on the rooftop terrace. The Texas sky was pale blue, the air warm with the scent of roasted coffee from a cafe below. "You've settled in quickly," she said. "I just try to remember what I needed back when I was the one nobody noticed." "That's exactly why you're here," she said softly. He smiled, then paused. "You ever think people can really change? Or do we just learn how to hide the old parts better?" Victoria looked out over the skyline. "I think we change when it finally costs us something not to." Their eyes met for a moment that lingered longer than it should. Then she looked away, voice light again. "Don't forget you have a press briefing with the internal team at 3. Try not to terrify the PR manager." "I'll behave," he said, laughing. But later that afternoon, as he left the meeting, a man in a courier jacket approached him at the elevator. "Delivery for Ethan Cole." Ethan frowned. "Didn't order anything. Just sign here," the man said quickly, leaving a brown envelope in his hand before disappearing down the corridor. Ethan opened it. Inside were photocopies, court records, police notes, headlines from 15 years ago, teen arrested for theft. His name circled in red. His chest tightened. A sticky note on top read, "Some stories don't disappear. Choose carefully who you trust." Ethan folded the papers slowly, the noise of the office fading into a dull hum. He looked toward Victoria's door, still open, her voice carrying through a phone call. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he slipped the envelope into his jacket and walked away. His steps suddenly heavy. The ghosts of his past had finally caught up, and this time they weren't just after him, they were coming for the fragile trust he and Victoria had built. Ethan sat alone in the parking garage, the envelope open on his lap. 15 years buried, now exposed in black ink. One mistake made as a scared teenager trying to buy medicine for his mother. He thought he'd left it behind. When Victoria called that evening, her voice was warm. "Big first day. How are you holding up?" He hesitated. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just tired. Get some rest." She said gently, "We've got a lot to build tomorrow." He hung up, staring at his reflection in the car window. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in. Across town, Damon poured himself a drink and smirked at the same file now sitting on his desk. "Let's see how long your halo lasts, Mr. Cole." And as night settled over Austin, the promise of redemption stood quietly at the edge of a storm. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Langford Tower, but Ethan barely noticed. He hadn't slept. The brown envelope lay in his briefcase, heavy as stone. Around him, the office buzzed with routine keyboards, clacking phones ringing. But inside, everything felt fragile. Victoria greeted him outside the conference room with her usual calm smile. "Ready for the staff briefing?" He nodded, forcing steadiness. "As I'll ever be." The meeting went well on the surface. New safety initiatives, fair pay reviews, applause from the maintenance staff. But Ethan's thoughts kept drifting to the papers burning in his briefcase. When it ended, Victoria caught his expression. "Something on your mind?" she asked. He almost told her. Almost. But fear won. "Just tired," he said. That afternoon, he visited the break room trying to clear his head. 2 younger employees were whispering by the vending machine. "Did you hear?" one murmured. "That new director, they say he's got a record. Something big." Ethan froze. The words hit harder than he expected. Someone had already leaked it. He turned and walked out before they could see his face. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the lights harsher. Victoria found him later in the lobby, staring out the glass doors. "Ethan," she said softly, "talk to me." He looked at her, jaw tight. "Someone's digging up my past. Damon Pierce, probably. He's trying to smear me." Her eyes sharpened. "Do you have proof?" He pulled the photocopies from his briefcase, handed them to her. "This is what he's using. It's true. I was 16. My mother was sick. I stole cough medicine. They arrested me. Case got sealed, but..." Victoria read the file in silence, then looked up. "And you think this makes you unfit for redemption?" He didn't answer. She folded the papers and set them aside. "I don't care what you did at 16. I care who you are now, and if Damon wants a war, he just found one." He stared at her, surprised by the fire in her voice. "You'd risk your name for me. I already did," she said, her tone steady. "And I'll do it again." Something in him broke loose then, not weakness, but the kind of gratitude that comes from years of being unseen. Outside, the wind picked up leaves swirling along the glass facade. Change was coming, and both of them could feel it. The boardroom at Langford Tower had never felt colder. The walls of glass that once symbolized power now reflected tension, and every polished surface seemed to amplify it. Victoria stood at the head of the table, the same spot where she'd once ruled through control and precision. Today, her power came from something entirely different: conviction. Around her sat the board members, men and women in dark suits, cautious eyes darting between her and Damon Pierce. Damon leaned back in his chair, calm as ever, his voice smooth enough to sound reasonable to those who didn't know him. "I understand your concern, Victoria," he began, "but let's not confuse sentiment with strategy. The company's reputation can't afford another scandal." She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut clean. "Our reputation doesn't come from silence. It comes from the kind of people we stand behind. And right now, one of those people has been slandered under your authority." Damon smiled thinly. "You're referring to Mr. Cole, I presume? The man with the sealed juvenile record?" Yes, she said, sliding a brown envelope across the table. The same sealed record you illegally accessed. The board members murmured surprise rippling through the room. Damon's smile faltered. You have no proof of that accusation, he said sharply. I do, Victoria replied. Our IT team traced the retrieval to your system login. The timestamp matches the night before the rumors began circulating. He went still. Victoria stepped closer, her voice steady but fierce. You could have come to me. You could have voiced your concerns like a professional. Instead, you dug into a man's past, twisted the truth, and leaked it to the press to destroy him. You didn't protect this company, Damon. You disgraced it. Damon's jaw clenched. You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. This is business. She shook her head. No, this is humanity, something you seem to have lost along the way. The room fell silent. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Effective immediately, Victoria continued. You are suspended pending investigation. Legal will contact you regarding further action. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. You're making a mistake, Victoria. No, she said, meeting his eyes with quiet strength. I'm finally correcting one. Damon's gaze hardened, but he didn't speak again. He gathered his files, his composure cracking just slightly as he left the room. The door closed with a sound that felt like an ending. Victoria exhaled steady but tired. The rest of the board remained still, unsure how to respond. Finally, one of them, a gray-haired woman near the end of the table, spoke. It's been a long time since someone reminded us what leadership actually looks like. Victoria offered a faint smile. Then, let's start remembering. Later that evening, she found Ethan on the lower floor where he was finishing up a maintenance check on the new safety system. The quiet hum of machines filled the background. You didn't have to fight for me, he said softly when she told him what happened. I did, she answered, because you were fighting alone for too long. He turned toward her eyes, heavy with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. You'll catch heat for this. Damon isn't the kind of man who walks away quietly. I've faced worse, she said with a small smile. And besides, I'm not doing this to save face. I'm doing it because what you represent is bigger than either of us. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of the city filtered faintly through the walls, distant traffic, a siren, a dog barking somewhere below. Then Ethan finally said, You really believe people can change, don't you? Victoria looked at him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. I have to, otherwise what's the point of forgiveness? He nodded slowly, the weight of years of struggle easing just a little. As they walked toward the exit, the lights of downtown Austin glimmered through the glass like scattered stars. The reflection showed two people walking side by side, not a CEO and a janitor, not a savior. And the saved, but two souls learning to rebuild what the world had once broken. That night, Victoria drove home with the windows down, the wind carrying the smell of rain and cedar through the city. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone inside her own success. And miles away, Ethan tucked Lily into bed, whispering a promise he could finally mean. Things are going to be okay now, sweetheart. The world outside wasn't perfect, never would be. But for both of them, redemption had stopped being a word and started becoming a life. 2 months later, the morning sun glinted off the new sign outside Langford Tower, Langford Industries People First. It wasn't a marketing slogan anymore. It was a promise. Ethan stood on the front steps watching employees pass beneath it with coffee cups and quiet smiles. There was laughter now in the hallways where silence used to live. The break room had become a meeting spot for everyone from executives to janitors. Even the cafeteria offered free meals on Fridays, something he'd insisted on during the first welfare committee meeting. Inside, Victoria waited by the elevator reading a staff memo. The safety upgrades on all floors are finished, she said as Ethan joined her. Fire exits, ventilation, staff insurance, all signed off. You've done good work, Mr. Cole. He smiled slightly. Not bad for a janitor, huh? Not bad for a man who refused to look away, she replied. They stepped out onto the 3rd floor, his department. Desks lined with plans, colorful charts pinned to the walls, the hum of computers and conversation. The employees greeted him warmly. Morning, Mr. Cole. Hey, boss. It still caught him off guard sometimes, the word boss. But despite the progress, a faint unease followed him like a shadow. He could feel it every time he caught someone whispering when they thought he wasn't listening. Damon's smear campaign had failed publicly, but privately people still remembered. Later that afternoon, Carmen entered his office carrying a thick folder. Press department finalized the announcement, she said. You and Ms. Langford are both scheduled to speak at the National Workplace Equity Conference in Chicago next month. They're calling you the face of the Second Chance Initiative. Ethan raised an eyebrow. The face of it? That sounds like trouble. Carmen smiled. It's called recognition. Don't fight it. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. I'm just not used to being the story. Usually people like me clean up after the stories are over. Maybe it's time the janitor tells one, she said. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A voice crackled through the line. Mr. Cole. This is Detective Rivas, Austin PD. We thought you should know Damon Pierce was picked up this morning. Fraud, misuse of company data, and extortion. He mentioned your name in the report. Ethan's stomach sank. My name? Yes, sir. He claims you coerced Miss Langford into removing him. We don't believe it, but it'll hit the press before noon. He hung up, pulse quickening. Outside, the hum of the office continued unaware, but he could already hear the whisper of trouble coming back around. Minutes later, Victoria stepped into his office, calm as ever. I heard, she said. It's already spreading. Of course it is, he muttered. People love seeing someone like me stumble. She shook her head. Then we won't stumble. We'll stand together again, like we always do. He looked at her, really looked, and realized how much she meant it. For all her polish and power, she wasn't untouchable anymore. She had chosen to stand beside him no matter how messy it got. Still, as they walked into the elevator, he couldn't shake the thought the past never really left. It just waited for its turn to test you again. And by the time they reached the ground floor, a crowd of reporters had already gathered at the doors. Cameras flashed, microphones rose like spears. Someone shouted, Mr. Cole, did you blackmail your way into your position? Another voice cut through sharp, Miss Langford. Did you cover up an internal investigation? Victoria's hand brushed against Ethan's, steadying him. Let's give them the truth, she whispered. He nodded once, straightening his shoulders. All right, he said quietly. Let's face it. And together they stepped into the sunlight. The reporters closed in fast, flashes exploding like sparks. Ethan kept his gaze forward, his pulse steady. Victoria raised her hand. Mr. Cole didn't blackmail anyone, she said firmly. He helped rebuild this company from the ground up. Damon Pierce's actions were his own, and justice has already begun. A hush spread through the crowd. Ethan stepped closer to the microphone's voice, calm but full. I made mistakes when I was young, but I've spent every day since trying to be better. Langford gave me that chance, and now I give it to others. That's the only truth that matters. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a few claps broke the silence, slow, genuine. Victoria turned to him and smiled softly. You did good. He exhaled, tension finally leaving his shoulders. Guess second chances make pretty good headlines after all. The cameras clicked again, but this time the light didn't feel harsh. It felt earned. Autumn came early that year. The trees along the Colorado River turned amber, and the city's air softened with that rare quiet that only comes after a storm. Langford Tower stood taller than ever, but inside it no longer felt like marble and steel. It felt human. Ethan arrived early that morning, coffee in one hand, a paper bag of breakfast tacos in the other. He greeted the security guard by name, waved to the janitors, and stopped by the front desk to leave a few tacos for the interns. Small gestures, things no one used to notice, had become the soul of the place. Upstairs, Victoria's office door was open, sunlight stretching across her desk. She looked up from her laptop, smiling. You're here before me again? Old habits, Ethan said, handing her a taco. Breakfast diplomacy. She laughed softly, taking it. You know, you're the only person who's ever brought food in here without scheduling it first. Then I guess I'm rewriting tradition. They ate quietly for a moment, both gazing out the window at the city below. You leave for Chicago tomorrow, she said, ready to speak to 1,000 people about redemption? He shrugged. I'll talk about work life, maybe a little girl who keeps drawing rainbows on every wall she finds. Victoria smiled. That might be exactly what they need to hear. Her tone grew softer. You've changed this place, Ethan. You've changed me. He looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her voice. Guess we both stopped pretending we were fine. She nodded, the faintest sadness in her smile. That's where healing starts, isn't it? Before he could answer, Carmen entered with a tablet. Sorry to interrupt. The media team just confirmed your story's trending again, but this time for the right reasons. Victoria turned to Ethan. See, sometimes doing the right thing catches up with you too, he chuckled. I'll take that kind of trouble. Later that day, Ethan left early to pick up Lily from school. The sidewalks were lined with pumpkins and hay bales for the fall festival. She ran into his arms, backpack bouncing. Daddy, guess what Ms. Langford said? She's coming to the school fair tomorrow. He smiled, ruffling her hair. Did she now? Must be brave to face a pie-throwing booth. Lily giggled. I'll save her from the whipped cream. As they crossed the street toward the bus stop, Ethan glanced back at the skyline. The tower gleamed gold in the afternoon light. For the first time, he didn't see it as a place that had broken him. It was where he'd finally put himself back together. But as the bus doors opened, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Chicago meant new pressure, new exposure. He'd been forgiven, yes, but the world was full of people who didn't like redemption stories. Still, when Lily's small hand slipped into his, all that worry fell quiet. Ready to go home, sweetheart? She nodded. Yeah. Let's go where the rainbows are. And in that simple phrase, Ethan realized something. Home wasn't a house or even a second chance. It was a moment fleeting and fragile when forgiveness finally felt like peace. The following evening, the city glowed under strings of fair lights. The East Austin Fall Festival had filled the park with laughter music and the smell of cinnamon and popcorn. Ethan walked through the crowd with Lily on his shoulders, her hands clutching a paper rainbow flag. Victoria stood near the bake sale booth, dressed simply in jeans and a soft white sweater. She looked almost unrecognizable from the woman who once ruled boardrooms from behind glass walls. When she saw them, her smile reached her eyes. You made it, she said. Wouldn't miss it, Ethan replied. Lily's been talking about saving you from whipped cream all week. Mission accepted. Victoria laughed. They spent the evening wandering between booths, ring tosses, pie contests, children's choirs singing under the oak trees. Every few minutes someone would recognize Ethan. A teacher thanked him for sponsoring new school lights. A janitor from another company shook his hand. Each thank you carried the same quiet reverence, a man who had fallen once but stood again. Later, as the festival wound down, Victoria and Ethan sat on a wooden bench near the edge of the park. Fireflies drifted through the air. Lily dozed in her father's lap, her rainbow flag still clutched in one hand. Victoria spoke softly. Tomorrow you fly to Chicago. When they ask about redemption, what will you tell them? Ethan thought for a long moment. That it's not about fixing the past, it's about using it to light the way forward. About people who refuse to give up on you when you can't even look in the mirror. She smiled faintly. That's beautiful. He looked at her. You gave me that light, Victoria. You didn't just offer me a job. You showed me how to believe again. She shook her head. You did that yourself. I just reminded you that you mattered. For a moment, the world went still. The music fading, the hum of voices distant. The city skyline shimmered beyond the trees. But here, under the faint glow of lanterns, everything felt small and real. Victoria glanced down at the sleeping child. She's going to grow up knowing what grace looks like. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, and maybe she'll remind the rest of us someday. They sat there until the lights began to dim and the air turned cool. When Ethan finally stood, he offered his hand. She took it, not as a gesture of gratitude or business, but of quiet friendship born from pain, rebuilt by choice. As they walked back toward the parking lot, Victoria looked up at the stars scattered across the Texas ski. You know, she said, sometimes I think redemption isn't something we earn. It's something we share. Ethan smiled, the kind that comes from peace rather than pride. Then we're doing it right. Behind them, the last of the fair lights flickered out. But the warmth lingered in the laughter of the children, the hum of the night, and in two people who had finally learned that home isn't where you begin, it's where you choose to forgive. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with applause, it comes quietly, like the first warm light creeping through a cold window. Ethan Cole's story wasn't about grand victories or wealth restored. It was about a man once invisible finding the courage to stand tall again, and a woman who dared to open her heart after years of hiding behind glass walls. Together, they discovered that forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a way of walking through the world step by step, hand in hand. In the end, they didn't rebuild just a company, they rebuilt the idea of home. A place where kindness mattered more than credentials, where mistakes became lessons instead of sentences. Victoria learned that leadership meant listening. Ethan learned that dignity could be born from struggle. And through their journey, Lily reminded them both that love in its purest form is the simplest kind of truth. Unconditional goodness has the power to change the course of a life. Everyone deserves love and a place to belong. Real happiness doesn't come from money or status. It grows from the quiet moments when we choose to care. Just like a porch light left on for someone returning late, one small act of grace can guide us all through life's darkest roads. Maybe you've known an Ethan in your life, a neighbor, a friend, a family member trying to start over, or maybe like Victoria, you've carried guilt too long waiting for a chance to make things right. Either way, this story is a reminder. It's never too late to forgive and never too late to begin again. So tonight, as you sit with your coffee or look out your window at the stillness of your street, take a breath. And remember, kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything. If this story touched your heart, type 1 in the comments. If you felt it could be told better, type 0 and share your thoughts. Because stories like this only live on when they connect us and maybe help us all find a little more light.